a great honour to be invited to address you this afternoon, and thank you very much indeed, Jeremy, for those kind words. It's perfectly true that my book got to #2 in the bestseller list, beaten only by a book about Michael Jackson. Yes. And also, thank you very much for mentioning that I've spoken here before. It was 11 years ago, and I was barracked and heckled, and I've been told this is the first time, the only time this has ever happened in the history of the Oldie Literary Lunch. Under normal circumstances, it's members of the audience who barrack and heckle me, but on this occasion it was one of the other speakers. I don't usually speak ill of the dead. I'd like to make an exception on this occasion, but there doesn't seem much point because he isn't here to hear the denunciation that I like to unfake. An apology is called for, said a writer about Napoleon, from anybody who imposes on the public another biography of Napoleon first. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was written in 1901. Since then, there have been as many books with Napoleon in the title as there have been days since his death. So why on earth, I write another biography of Napoleon? The answer is that the reason I spent 6 years of my life on this book, longer in fact than Napoleon spent on St. Helena and Elba put together, is that in 2004 the Fondation Napoleon in Paris started bringing out the complete collection of Napoleon's letters, no fewer, ladies and gentlemen, than 33,000 of them. 33,000 letters signed by him, and what they do is to remind the reader what an extraordinary capacity this man had for compartmentalizing his brain. His mind, this omnivorous mind, which meant that whilst he was ordering his armies to cross Europe for the Austerlitz campaign, he was also sending a note to Pierre Forfait, the prefect of Genoa, to tell him to stop taking his mistress to the opera. He was able, when moving across actually it was the night before Borodino, a totally monstrous battle, the equivalent of having a jumbo jet, a fully laden jumbo jet, crashing into an area 6 miles square, killing and wounding everybody on board every 5 minutes for the entire 10 hours of the battle. Worse than the bloodiest battle in human history after the First World War. And yet the night before, he was able to sit down and write the rules of a girls' school that he wanted to set up in Saint-Denis, just outside Paris. A few weeks later, he was in the Kremlin, just as the Russians had burnt down 2/3 of their own co-capital. And he was able to write the regulations for the Comédie Française. This is an extraordinary man, both in terms of compartmentalization and time management. The reviews of this book have universally called it beautifully written and wonderfully researched. I paraphrase. But nonetheless, they've also pretty much all said, but not, I hasten to add Jeremy's wonderful one, said that Napoleon was a monster, the equivalent, as some of them have said, of Saddam Hussein, Idi Amin, and Colonel Gaddafi. One of them actually even equated him to Silvio Berlusconi. Actually, that is less unlikely, owing to the fact that in this book I have identified no fewer than 22 mistresses that Napoleon had. So in that case, he did have something to do with Silvio Berlusconi. And also one has to admire the time management. But this is a man, ladies and gentlemen, who wrote the Napoleonic Code, who made these 46 different legal codes that France had at that time, and brought them down just into one understandable body of laws. Who created the Grande École and the Lycée, which still provide fine education, the Légion d'honneur, which Frenchmen still rightly covet, the Banque de France, the administrative setup with the prefects. When you go on your romantic weekend to Paris, you will cross one of the 4 bridges that he built. You will walk along the 2.5 miles of quays that he created. This is a builder, a creator. He was very far, ladies and gentlemen, from anything to do with Colonel Gaddafi or Idi Amin. And in the course also of researching this book, I visited no fewer than 53 in 60 battlefields. And in the course of doing that, I also appreciated what an extraordinary military genius he was. But he himself said, rightly, that his battles were not the ultimate thing that were going to be remembered, but that his institutions, the ones he built up, were. And one of them, of course, was meritocracy. 1,000 years of French history, nobody had appointed so many people from across the social spectrum of France to the grand positions in the French army. He made no fewer than 10 of his 26 marshals from the sons of innkeepers and bailiffs and barrel keepers and peasants. This was an extraordinary moment in French meritocracy. In fact, he could bump up to 11 because Marshal Serurier, who claimed that his father held a royal appointment, actually his father had been the royal mole catcher. So in a sense, it's 11 out of the 26. And why, therefore, do we constantly see him, especially here in England, in such a negative way? And the answer is that he was very unlucky in that he did declare 2 wars, the war against Spain and the war against Russia, as against the 7 wars, the 7 wars of the 7 coalitions that were declared on him. It wasn't because he was a warmonger. It was partly because he was very unlucky in the unbelievable propaganda that was unleashed against him in the early 19th century, especially living at the same time as George Cruikshank and Thomas Rowlandson and James Gilray, and these people who all made him out to be a midget. Ladies and gentlemen, he was exactly my height. So I don't think it was dwarf fiction anywhere at all. And when I went to St Helena, which is a completely nightmarish place to get to, it takes 6 days by boat from Cape Town to get to this tiny little woebegone island in the middle of the Atlantic. And then when I went along with his house and went to the room in which he died, and then he was looking, I lay down on his deathbed, and I am exactly the right height. So it's entirely double-checked. He wasn't this dwarf, nor was he somebody who suffered from a Napoleon complex. There was such a thing as a Napoleon complex, it's just that Napoleon didn't have one. The reasons that he invaded Russia, which are all set out in a chapter called number 24, which I believe might be on sale later on today, are many and various, not least because he destroyed the Russian army twice in early campaigns in Jena and Austerlitz and Friedland. He had an army twice the size of Russia's. He had never intended to go to Moscow in the first place. He didn't know that 140,000 of his men were going to die of typhus, which wasn't diagnosed for another 9 years. And he intended to stop at various points on the way. This was not a psychopathic kind of evil thing that some of the historians who concentrate on Napoleon as another Hitler or another Stalin figure obsess about. So that too seemed to be a very extraordinary thing, which I came away from these letters of his feeling. And one of the facts about, of course, I've written about Adolf Hitler and others in the past. One of the other things that sets him apart very much from normal dictators is that they only had a wonderful sense of humour. He was an extremely fun man, something one doesn't factor in at all. When one evening an escaped lunatic from a lunatic asylum came up to him at the opera and said that he'd fallen in love with the Empress Josephine, Napoleon said, "You seem to have made a very curious choice of confidant." On another occasion, he was written to by the Archbishop of Paris, the Cardinal de Rome, who had said that he wanted to, that he would love to have the opportunity, it was just before the coronation, to die in the Emperor's service. He hoped he would be able to give his life to the Emperor. And this churchman wrote, Napoleon wrote in the top right-hand corner of the letter, "Please pay £12,000 to the Archbishop of Paris out of the theatrical fund." So here we have this man, ladies and gentlemen, who was entirely unlike the kind of figure I think that most British historians have made him out to be. It was a fabulous honour, a privilege really, to be able to commune with him for 6 years. And I agree with the words of George Hume, who was the midshipman on board HMS Bellerophon, to which he surrendered on the 14th of July 1815, who wrote that he showed us what one small creature like ourselves can achieve in a life so short. Thank you very much.